Ahoy folks, Craig signing in for Pure Xbox to share with you our review of Assassin's Creed Mirage on the Xbox Series X and S. This review was written by stealthy stabman PJ O'Reilly for PureXbox.com and turned into video by me. And normally I would say let's dive into it, but on this occasion, let's really dive into it. The Assassin's Creed franchise has come a long way since we first got our hands on a fairly disappointing tech demo that was the original experience all the way back in 2007. And yes, that was already 16 years ago already. The core concept behind Assassin's Creed has always been a strong one, and the first outing was undoubtedly a real graphical tour de force. But the ideas behind its gameplay mechanics, although solid in theory, came off as half-baked, shallow, and repetitive in the extreme. Of course, over the years that followed, Ubisoft has been very clear with this series, managing to tweak and evolve it from its somewhat rudimentary origins to the likes of the all-encompassing triumph that is Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Along the way, the most controversial aspect of this evolution has been a shift from the purely stealth-focused stabby good times of the early games to the enormous open-world action extravaganzas that have become mainstay since Origins added in that RPG-light layer. It feels as though there's a fan base divided here between advocates of the new action-heavy behemoths we've had since Bayek's 2017 adventures, and the older stealth-tastic games. This particular reviewer has mostly preferred the newer, bigger adventures on the whole, mainly because the parkour and combat has seen so many improvements, but with Odyssey and Valhalla, it definitely felt as though Ubisoft was beginning to push the limits of how big a game can be, how packed full of distractions it can get, before it was all a bit too much. And so, enter Assassin's Creed Mirage. Here we have a reboot of sorts, a return to the origins of the franchise that sees many layers that have accumulated over the years stripped back to reveal the stealth heart still beating away at the core of it all. This feels like a return to that very first game, a touching base that gives us the graphical tour de force once again, although it's impossible to deploy the same shock and awe in terms of the looks these days, this time sat alongside mechanics that actually work, gameplay that feels slick and smooth, and ideas that have been properly realized and put into action. Mirage whisks us away to 9th century Baghdad and into the sneaking shoes of Basim ibn Ishaq, a character who first appeared in Valhalla, as he rises from common street thief to a member of the Brotherhood of Fancy Assassins. The focus here is on more linear gameplay that's 100% concentrated on stealth, and a narrative that keeps you within a far smaller world map than we've seen in recent entries. Make no mistake, it's still fairly big. This is still a modern open world game with its fair share of secrets and collectibles to find. It's just nowhere near the insanity of the likes of Odyssey's sprawling landmasses. And this is a downscale that's reflected in the game's price, which has seen a bit of a knockdown as a result of a smaller adventure on offer. This all makes for a very tidy and manageable Assassin's Creed experience, somewhere around the 30-hour mark if you take your time. And honestly, it feels like a refreshing relief when compared to the 100+ hour commitments we had to make to see Ivor's story through. As it turns out, this is one of the game's biggest selling points, really, a stripped-back slice of old-school Assassin's Creed action that respects your downtime and leaves you wanting for more, giving you all the action without the excesses. It's also rather a timely blessing given the sheer number of enormous games vying for our time right now. Mirage is something that you can definitely finish over a week or so without too much trouble. The scaled-back world and story also lets the devs go to town on the finer details, and in Baghdad we've got a fantastic, well-realized virtual playground that's dripping in historical accuracy and atmosphere. On this note, it's nice to see that there's a lot of Arabic language deployed across the game, with main characters and NPCs using lots of greetings and other phrases.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
And there's nothing more atmospheric than hearing the call to prayer echo around these evocative environments as dusk settles over the region and Basim perches on a viewpoint high over the city. There's a juicy codex of historical facts and figures to digest too, real-world sites to visit, and plenty to take in about a fascinating period of time. Granted, even with the biggest of Assassin's Creed games, the commitment to historical accuracy in education has always been top-notch, but here it all feels that little bit more manageable in terms of quantity, and this in turn feeds more directly into the sense of time and place that informs your adventures in Baghdad. We learn stuff is what we're trying to say. But what about the actual gameplay itself? Well, for the most part, when following along the main narrative path, Basim is charged with investigating the shadowy Templar Order, and the game gives you a handy investigations tab in its menus where you can get to go all Sherlock Holmes as you choose which thread or mission you want to follow next in order to unravel the identities of your assassination targets.
Do you understand?
It's not particularly freeform, but it's nice that you can choose which targets or story aspects you want to focus on next, even if all the roads are leading to the same blood-soaked place.
Go now, wetted with the blood of the slain. I will find you when it is over.
Mirage brings back the series' boxed-off assassination missions that give you a high-profile target to take out within a set area during the big story beats. You'll need to find a way into a fortified building or enemy camp, use your eagle vision and bird pal Enkidu to tag patrolling guards or items of interest, then to get busy stabbing and sneaking your way to the order member that's currently needing shivved. You can also use collectible tokens to pay bandits to make a violent distraction, hide in crowds, and blend in by simply sitting down. Basim has access to all of your old favorite Assassin's tricks and toys too. Smoke bombs, sleep darts, poison traps, throwing knives, and so on. And these gadgets, alongside the actual mechanics of stealth, the parkour, and enemy alert systems and cooldowns, feels as though they work better than ever here. A huge plus is that you can actually now get caught by a guard, have that guard and a few of their pals attack you, make a whole bunch of noise, and not alert the entire camp. Going loud is still not advised, as the actual combat aspects here have been scaled back and simplified, but when it does happen, scraps can be contained. You can wipe out alerted adversaries and continue the infiltration without needing to exit the area and wait until everybody forgets. These refinements make for a game that excels when just chilling out and messing with its systems, toying with guards, building up your all-new Assassin's Focus gauge to pull off ultra-cool multi-kills, and deciding how best to drop the big baddies.
Time to down!
Skill trees have been simplified and refined too, and there's a nice simple flow to the upgrades that slowly give you more control and mastery over how you go about your murderizing. All told, what you've got in Assassin's Creed Mirage is a return to pure stealth that feels far more polished than earlier games in the franchise. It doesn't do anything new, it's small in scale and sticks to stealth without any real surprises, but what's here is a great time for fans of sneaking around and pulling off hits without getting caught.
Find peace, warrior.
One that also does away with almost all of the most infuriating aspects of the older entries in the franchise. Well, almost. Yes, there are still some issues that do remain, and they're mostly related to how Basim moves around and interacts with his environment. Parkour is fine for the most part, but there is still a clunkiness, specifically around detaching yourself or climbing down from buildings, that can be a bit infuriating. We've been caught by guards simply because we couldn't get ourselves off a wall quickly enough more times than through any fault in our own planning. We've also had some problems interacting with NPCs, with shopkeepers in particular requiring perfect placement before a prompt arrives to allow us to chat. Small issues for sure, but issues that begin to grate over time. We also found that, although the narrative is fine for the most part, it does drag a little in the midsection. We definitely began to lose interest slightly as Basim was sent from one target to the next with the same objective of simply killing over and over again. Beyond these issues though, we've come away impressed with Assassin's Creed Mirage overall, to the point that we reckon the series should just ditch the bloat going forward and stick to streamlined skulking around. There's a lovely focus to everything here, from the smaller scale of the story and world to the stripped back RPG systems and side activities that make for a wonderfully cohesive experience. That feeling of being completely lost that sometimes crept over us in Odyssey or Valhalla has been fully vanquished. Indeed, even the infamous Ubisoft blanket of countless icons on your world map, although still numerous, now feels as though it mostly leads you towards the stuff that feels fun or useful instead of mere filler. The streamlined loot system, new costumes, weapons, and upgrades also ensure that every shiny treasure chest on your radar is worth seeking out, and this feeds into giving you a reason to explore every corner of the world that you can now actually see without having to sacrifice several years of your life. On a quick performance note before we wrap up, we've tried out both quality and performance modes, and we reckon sticking to performance is your best bet here. Quality does look a little nicer as expected, but the 60 FPS is more than worth the drop in eye candy as it makes for smoother traversal of Baghdad's streets and rooftops. And so, in the end, Assassin's Creed Mirage makes for a successful return to the series' roots, bar a few small issues here and there. This is a highly entertaining stealth-focused effort that gives you lots of toys and tricks to play around with in a setting that's bursting with fine details and atmosphere. Basim makes for a solid protagonist. Baghdad's an evocative setting, and fans of the classic entries in this franchise will no doubt love every second of what's on offer. Yes, there's nothing here that's particularly new or unique. There are a few issues regarding repetition and some sticky parkour controls, but overall, this is a fine adventure that more or less gives us the game that we'd hoped for when we first took that leap of faith back in 2007. Seeing as though you're still here, I'd like you to answer a question for me. Do you prefer your 100-hour Assassin's Creed adventures, or does a much shorter experience sound better? I'd love to see a dialogue in the comments. Be sure to check out purexbox.com for all the latest Xbox news, updates, and reviews like this one, as well as subscribing to the channel here too. All there's left to say is bye-bye for now. Next quick.